Hello and good morning, YouTube. Today is September 5th. I think I'm about 20 days sober, clean and serene. No hypes, pipes, booze, or pills. No weed either this time. That used to be my thing. I used to say, no hypes, pipes, booze, or pills, smoking the green and staying clean. But at this time, I'm not even smoking the green. Quit smoking cigarettes too. That's been over a year. But since I quit smoking the weed, I stopped putting tobacco in my bong head, so I haven't had any tobacco at all either. So doing all right, doing not too bad. Yeah, I just woke up, cleaned my room and stuff. I had to go have a shower, but I just wanted to make this video first. I thought today I'd start with maybe the first chapter from the 12 Steps and the 12 Traditions. It's not too long, so let me just get going, and then this video can be, not too long. So step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and meth, sex, gambling, whatever it may be, food, sex and love, whatever it might be, right? We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one, of course. Every natural instinct cries out against the idea of personal powerlessness. It is truly awful to admit that, glass in hand, we have warped our minds into such an obsession for destructive drinking that only an act of providence can remove it from us. No other kind of bankruptcy is like this one. Alcohol now became the rapacious creditor, bleeds us of all self-sufficiency, and all will to resist its demands. Once this stark fact is accepted, our bankruptcy as going human concerns is complete. But upon entering AA, we soon take quite another view of this absolute humiliation. We perceive that only through utter defeat are we able to take our first steps towards liberation and strength. Our admissions of personal powerlessness finally turn out to be the firm bedrock upon which happy and purposeful lives may be built. We know that little good can come to any alcoholic who joins AA unless he has first accepted his devastating weakness and all its consequences. Until he so humbles himself, his sobriety, if any, will be precarious. Of real happiness he will find none at all. Proved beyond doubt by an immense experience, this is one of the facts of AA life. The principle that we shall find no enduring strength until we first admit complete defeat is the main taproot from which our whole society has sprung and flowered. When first challenged to admit defeat, most of us revolted. We had approached AA expecting to be taught self-confidence. Then we had been told that, so far as alcohol is concerned, self-confidence was no good whatsoever. In fact, it was a total liability. Our sponsors declared that we were the victims of a mental obsession so subtly powerful that no amount of human willpower could break it. There was, they said, no such thing as the personal conquest of the compulsion by the unaided will. Relentlessly deepening our dilemma, our sponsors pointed out an increasing sensitivity to alcohol, an allergy, they called it. The tyrant alcohol wielded a double-edged sword over us. First, we were smitten by an insane urge that condemned us to go on drinking, and then by an allergy of the body that ensured we would ultimately destroy ourselves in the process. Few indeed were those who, so assailed, had ever won through in single-handed combat. It was a statistical fact that alcoholics almost never recovered on their own resources, and this had been true apparently ever since man had first crushed grapes. In AA's pioneering time, none but the most desperate cases would swallow and digest this unpalatable truth. Even these last gaspers often had difficulty in realizing how hopeless they actually were. But a few did, and when these laid hold of AA principles with all the fervor with which the drowning sees life preservers, they almost invariably got well. That is why the first edition of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, published when our membership was small, dealt with low-bottom cases only. Many less desperate alcoholics tried AA but did not succeed because they could not make the admission of hopelessness. It is a tremendous satisfaction to record that in the following years this changed. Alcoholics who still had their health, their families, their jobs, and even 2 cars in the garage began to recognize their alcoholism. As this trend grew, they were joined by young people who were scarcely more than potential alcoholics. They were spared that last 10 or 15 years of literal hell the rest of us had gone through. Since step one requires an admission that our lives had become unmanageable, how could people such as these take this step? It was obviously necessary to raise the bottom the rest of us had hit to the point where it would hit them. By going back in our own drinking histories, we could show that years before we realized it, we were out of control, that our drinking even then was no mere habit, that it was indeed the beginning of a fatal progression. To the doubters, we could say, perhaps you're not an alcoholic after all. Why don't you try some more controlled drinking? Bearing in mind, meanwhile, that what we have told you about alcoholism. This attitude brought immediate and practical results. It was then discovered that when one alcoholic had planted in the mind of another the true nature of his malady, that person could never be the same again. Following every spree, he would say to himself, maybe those AAs were right. After a few such experiences, often years before the onset of extreme difficulties, he would return to us convinced he had hit bottom as truly as any of us. John Barleycorn himself had become our best advocate. While the insistence that every AA must hit bottom first, the answer is that few people will sincerely try to practice the AA program unless they have hit bottom. For practicing AA's remaining 11 steps means the adoption of attitudes and actions that almost no alcoholic who is still drinking can dream of taking, who wishes to be rigorously honest and tolerant, who wants to confess his faults to another and make restitutions to harm done, who cares anything about a higher power, let alone meditation and prayer, who wants to sacrifice time and energy in trying to carry AA's message to the next sufferer. No, the average alcoholic, self-centered in the extreme, doesn't care for this prospect, unless he has to do these things in order to stay alive himself. Under the lash of alcoholism, we were driven to AA, and there we discovered the fatal nature of our situation. Then and only then did we become as open-minded to conviction and as willing to listen as a dying can be. We stand ready to do anything which will lift the merciless obsession from us. Right, and I've told you before, like, I just prefer AA over NA or other 12-step programs. The wording doesn't matter. Alcohol can be replaced with crystal fucking methamphetamine or any other drug or any other obsession, and for that matter, even food, right? I'm powerless over food, right? I don't know, it sounds silly, but it can. Like, the principles are there. I don't know. I want to start reading from the 12 and 12. That's what that book is called. It's the 12 steps and 12 traditions, right? So it has a chapter on each of the 12 steps, and also 12 traditions are the traditions are the things that keep the groups always the same, so that they don't change, so that this program may always be the same. Because it worked in the past, right, for people who first got sober. And so they just want the program to remain as whole and as original as it always was, because they found something that finally worked for people. And then they'll claim in AA that we do not hold the monopoly on sobriety, right? Like, there are other ways for people to get sober. This is the only way that worked for me. I can't do it on my own. Emotional balance. Today's the 5th, right? I better just fucking make sure. Yes. Okay. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible. 12 steps and 12 traditions. Page 83. When I survey my drinking days, I recall many people whom my life touched casually, but whose days I... Hold on. Emotional balance. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible. The 12 steps and 12 traditions, page 83. Sorry. When I survey my drinking days, I recall many people whom my life touched casually, but whose days I troubled through my anger and sarcasm. These people are untraceable, and direct amends to them are not possible. The only amends I can make to those untraceable individuals, the only changes for the better I can offer, are indirect amends made to other people whose paths briefly crossed mine. Courtesy and kindness, regularly practiced, help me to live in emotional balance at peace with myself. One more reading from A New Day. Anyone can carry his burden, however heavy, until nightfall. Anyone can do his work, however hard, for one day. Robert Louis Stevenson. There are times when we face especially difficult tasks. When we contemplate the enormity of what lies ahead, our projections often tell us that we can't possibly make it through, even though we must. We can become so thoroughly persuaded we're going to fall short that our negative conviction becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That happens to me all the time. Before we get to that point, it may be helpful to mentally step outside of the situation, to change perspectives as well as develop a better game plan. It may also be useful simply to think about how we actually live our lives. If we take a moment to do that, it becomes quickly obvious that few things are accomplished all at once. We eat our meals one bite at a time. We drive to work 1 mile at a time. Our lifeblood is pumped one heartbeat at a time. If all this is true, why then do we sometimes feel we have to take on life's difficult challenges in their entirety? The point is that we don't have to. We can accomplish even the most burdensome tasks one day at a time, or if that's too much, 1 hour, or even 1 minute at a time. Thought for today: negative projections can become self-fulfilling prophecies. Alright. Anyways, that's all you need from me today, and I hope you all have a good day. I will talk to you tomorrow. Be blessed.